The question of euthanasia and assisted suicide is regularly debated in the UK Parliament. Now that the British Medical Association has dropped their position in this regard, people are wondering whether it's only a matter of time before it is legalised in the UK. The argument in favour for euthanasia and assisted suicide is a compelling one and is supported by several religious leaders. The oldest argument is that of compassion. Lord George Carey, former Archbishop of Canterbury, is quoted saying, "When suffering is so great that some patients make repeated pleas to die, it seems a denial of that loving compassion, which is the hallmark of Christianity, to refuse to allow them to fulfill their own clearly stated request." However, with today's medical advances, we have the expertise and technology to be able to relieve this physical pain effectively and safely. Therefore, we find the argument of compassion slipping away in favour for that of autonomy. Sir Terry Pratchett's main argument in favour is as follows: "I believe that any individual should have the right to choose the time and the conditions of their death." Taking a deeper look into the root of these arguments, we find fear, a fear of total pain that is physically, relationally, emotionally, and spiritually, a fear of indignity, and a fear of the loss of independence. So what is the Christian response? The euthanasia debate highlights three fundamental questions. What is it to be human? What is freedom? And what is suffering? But first and foremost, we must never forget who and what we are talking about. People, human beings who worry, suffer, agonize, and bleed and die. People in immense pain. So we must never reduce these discussions to philosophical or theological debates. We must never go about these issues with rhetoric or judgment in our voices, but with tears in our eyes as we recognize the immense agony and pain humanity is going through. To be human is to be a reflection of God's mysterious being. God said, "Let us make mankind in our image," Genesis 1:26. Therefore, to kill or take one's own life is particularly significant because it is a direct desecration of God's own image. "Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made man," Genesis 9:6. This in turn answers the question of what of a life that is no longer worth living due to unforeseen diseases. The worth of a life is not measured by our talents, DNA, or physical abilities, but by a mysterious depiction of God. We are irreplaceable self-portraits of God, no matter how damaged a painting might be. What of the question of freedom? To kill in the name of freedom is to go against the hidden grain of the created moral order. People of faith are thought to have surrendered their freedom for rigid traditions and orders of organized religion. However, to live by the moral grain is to be free, just as the fish that stays in water is also free, so long as it follows the orders of creation. Thirdly, what is suffering? To suffer means to accept or to allow. It is a reality that challenges our modern tendency to be control freaks. One of the reasons why a secular world no longer sees any benefit in suffering is because suffering highlights how important it is to depend on one another, and it illustrates the human narrative. Looking at the basic life cycle of people, We are born as entirely dependent beings. As we grow, we see others depend on us, and as we progress in age, we find that we must depend on others once more. It is the cycle of life. It is how we have been designed. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Galatians 6:2. To be independent is an illusion. To depend on one another or a community should therefore by no means be something to fear or be ashamed of, but it is a commandment we must obey. This care for the vulnerable has been integrated into society through palliative care established by Christian doctor Dame Cicely Saunders in 1967. Palliative care does not intend to hasten or prolong the death of the dying patient. Instead, it allows the patient to focus on using the last few days, hours, and weeks to the maximum. You matter because you are you, and you matter to the end of your life. We will do all we can not only to help you die peacefully, but also to live until you die. Dame Cicely Saunders. She achieved this motto by addressing the fear of total pain. Physical aspects were dealt with through the right balance of safe painkillers. Relationships were contacted and restored on behalf of patients. Emotional comfort was addressed through talking therapy, counseling, and friendship. Finally, spiritual comfort was addressed with a chapel situated at the center of the first hospice, St. Christopher's, enabling beds to be easily wheeled in at any stage of illness. Finally, what does it mean to die well? Dying well is a reflection of living faithfully. It is a time to fulfill dreams that can be accomplished in the last few days, relinquishing tasks that cannot be completed in this lifetime, learning new things the Father has to teach, focusing on the things that matter, saying sorry and reconciling and healing relationships, and receiving afresh the grace and forgiveness of God. Most importantly, dying well is a time for preparing in faith, hope, and love to meet my Creator and my Redeemer face to face. To conclude, the death of human beings is not to be welcomed or hastened. Death is an enemy which we must fight against, but by God's grace, death is also a strange kind of healing and a gateway to a new reality.